guys, welcome back to Hart Books. This is going to be my February Part 2 wrap-up. So the first set of books I'm going to talk about are books that I read during the Romance Readers Readathon. So I, in some ways, did a really good job with this readathon because I did manage to complete 3 challenges that were set for it, and also I had a good time reading them. But in another sense, I did not read one TBR book. Not one. I'm coming to the conclusion that I'm just not capable of reading off of a TBR, and if I do a readathon in the future, I should just go by the seat of my pants because that's pretty much how I like to choose books. I'm just not able to do it. So I did change up the books on that TBR, but I did enjoy reading them. So the first one I read was to read a romantic thriller, and so I read Till Death by Jennifer Armentrout. I really enjoyed this one. I hadn't really read many romantic thrillers before, and I'm glad I jumped in with one by Jennifer Armentrout because I knew I already liked her writing. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. This is about a woman named Sasha, who when she was younger, she was about 19, she was taken captive by a serial killer, but she escaped and she was able to kind of go on with her life, but obviously she'd been through a really horrific, tragic event, and she moved away from her hometown to kind of try and get past some of it. But when the book starts, she's come back home to help her mom work at the inn and kind of just like come to terms with her past in a way. And when she comes home, all these kind of oddly similar tragedies are starting to happen. And so that's kind of where the story delves in. And then the other main character we have is a cop, and he was her boyfriend at the time that she was taken. So it kind of talks about their relationship. Obviously, a lot of those pieces have to be kind of picked up and put back together again. I thought it was a really good mystery in a way. It kept me on the edge of my seat. I was really gripping. It was creepy enough to keep you entertained, but not creepy enough to keep me up all night. So for me, that was a win. The only reason I gave it 4 instead of 5 stars is I did see a few of the twists coming ahead of time. So for me, that just kind of warranted maybe taking a star off. The second book I read was The Ugly Duchess by Eloisa James. This one was a bit of a letdown for me. I gave it about a 3.5 stars. I like Eloisa James' other work. I definitely recommend it. This just wasn't a favorite of mine. So I'm gonna try and tell you why without giving away many spoilers, but basically this story follows Theodora, who is the Ugly Duchess, and she kind of is just known as being not very pretty, kind of manly looking, which I had a very hard time picturing with like the cover looking like this, but anyways, it follows her and James, who are kind of childhood friends, and she's like the ward of his father, so they really do grow up together. Well, James's father squanders all his family money away and says, you need to marry Theodora and take all of her money, basically, you know, her dowry. James does not want to do this because he thinks Theodora needs someone who loves her, and he doesn't think he loves her that way. But wouldn't you know, they do end up married, and that's kind of the beginning of the story. Basically, things happen that I can't really go into, but they are separated for a good chunk of this book. And that was where the trouble started. I really enjoyed the first quarter of this book, but then when they were separated while still being married, I just really struggled to get through it, and also struggled to really sympathize with the hero. I liked him, but I think a lot of his choices, particularly ones he made when they were separated, I just couldn't get past. I felt like when they were eventually brought back together, the heroine, while she made him go through a lot to get back in her good graces, I feel like she should have made him really go through more of them because he didn't grovel enough for me. You know, I think I like a redeemable character, and I've seen that done very well. This one was not, to me, done well. I felt like he wasn't sorry enough for some of his actions. So I gave it 3.5. By the end of the book, I was reading for them, but it took me a long time to get there. Forgot to say, I read this one for the challenge to read a book by Harlequin because, as some of you guys very kindly told me, Avon, which is the publisher of this book, is actually part of Harlequin now. I think they're owned by Harlequin, so that's what this one is. The next challenge was to read a historical, so I reread Devil in Spring by Lisa Kleypas. I've already talked about this one like a couple times on this channel, so I'll just say my reread got a 5 stars. I loved it. I wanted to reread it before her new book comes out because there are some like a little bit of overlapping. I love Pandora and Gabriel. If you want a really great spunky heroine and a just really swoon-worthy hero, definitely pick this one up. I think the characters and the way that Lisa Kleypas puts so many details into her character's backstory that just make them so lovable is my favorite part. I'm a character reader. I love a good character, and she does no wrong in my eyes. So those were the 3 books that I read for that challenge. So the rest of them are just going to be books that I read for the rest of the month of February. The next one I read is Next Year in Havana by Chanel Clayton. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I do have a full review on my channel for this. If you're interested, definitely go over there and watch it. But this one I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It was fantastic. It's a historical fiction that takes place from 2 different perspectives. One from 1958 Cuba during the Cuban Revolution, and one in modern day times. So it's a grandmother and a granddaughter who are the 2 different heroines, and it definitely has a beautiful love story. If you like history, if you like a really just gripping, heartfelt story with a lot of really interesting history and facts that I didn't know, definitely pick this up. Like I said, check out the review if you want to know more of my thoughts. The next book I read was Twisted Fate by Jessie Elliott. This, I believe, is Jessie's debut novel, and it was really awesome. I really liked it, and I think it's a really strong starting point for a series, and I believe this is going to be a series. I know there's at least 1 more book coming for it. So this follows our main character who is in college, and she, at the beginning of the book, gets captured by a fae. And in this storyline, there's kind of 2 different kinds of fae, and they're kind of battling against each other in a bit of like a war. But what I did like is that the fae aren't in like a different world or realm. They're in, you know, regular, like our world. And I thought that was really interesting and a kind of a different way to look at fae. So then you have our main hero, who is the leader of the fae. Who doesn't like that? It's definitely a hate to love storyline, also one of my favorite tropes. It had a lot of really fun paranormal aspects to it, but I also thought that the characters were developed pretty well, or quite well actually. I liked the main character's background. We got to see her family life, and her brother was a big part of the story. I liked getting to know Tristan, who's the hero, and I just thought it was done really well. There were a few things I felt like could have been developed a little bit more, especially things about the world of the fae. You know, I know they're here and not in a whole world, but I felt like just in general a bit more of their like history. But having said that, I feel like a lot of that might be coming in the 2nd book, so I will withhold judgment. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really fun start to a new series. The next book I read was The Day of the Duchess by Sarah MacLean. Funnily enough, this storyline has a lot of similarities actually to the Ugly Duchess storyline, but I loved this one a lot. I think I gave this, I can't remember if it was a 4 or a 5 star. It was somewhere very close to a 5 star if I didn't give it that. So this story takes place, also it's book 3 in the Scandal and Scoundrel series, which, in case you're wondering. So this story follows Serafina, who is married to Malcolm, but when the story starts, they have not seen each other for a long time. For about 3 years, they haven't seen each other. So as I said, similar to the other storyline. But this one, to me, had a much stronger reason why these 2 have been separated. I thought that Sarah MacLean did a really good job of giving flashbacks to see how they fell in love and why they got married, because that really made you emotionally attached to these characters. I was crying within the first like chapter and a half of this book, just because that was how easy she made it to kind of empathize with these characters. So obviously they were married, they were in love, and something happened that separated them. Malcolm has been kind of on a self-imposed kind of solitude because of what happened, and Serafina has kind of tried to move past it and create a new life for herself. Well, all of a sudden, Serafina shows up and is demanding a divorce because she is just wanting to move on and kind of get on with it. Well, divorce was not easy to come by back then, so obviously a lot has to take place, and he makes her this deal because he is still very much so in love with her, and she probably is in love with him, but you know, she doesn't want to come to that realization yet. So he makes her a deal and says, hey, if you come to my estate with me for, I think it was 3 weeks, and help find your replacement, my new wife, then you can have your divorce. Now, I don't think Malcolm actually had any intentions of giving her said divorce, but it was really entertaining to watch. So I thought this was fantastic. I don't know if it's because of the way she wrote Malcolm, but even though he made mistakes as well, and so did Serafina, I felt like they really had been punishing themselves for years for these mistakes, and he groveled quite well. The first guy in the first book I was talking about did not, and this one I felt like they deserved a happy ever after. If anyone deserved it, they did, and they really worked to get it. This was a very emotional historical for me. Sometimes historicals can be a bit fluffy, but this one for me really hit the emotions hard, and I really liked it because of that. Like I said, it's not necessarily a light read, for me at least, but I loved it. It was so good. The ending was perfect. Go read this book. Sarah MacLean, awesome. This is my second book by her, and I definitely want to read the rest of the series, but also all of her other work. The last book I read this month was Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. This is actually a reread for me, but Books Are My Heart, her channel here on YouTube, is having a book club, kind of like romance readers book club type thing. And this is the book that they picked for the first book to be discussed. So I figured I would reread it because I didn't remember all the details, but I remember loving it. And this was so good. So good. I love Mia Sheridan. She's a beautiful writer. This follows a main character named Archer, and as you could guess from the title, he went through a tragic event when he was a child and does not have the ability to talk. So he's not mute, but he just can't talk. I guess that's the same thing as mute, but he has no voice. Our other main character is Bree, and she is new to town, and she kind of just wants to escape her past. She had something happen recently that really just was a tragic event and really shook her, and she kind of just wants to get away. So she comes to this small town and is renting a house, and she runs into Archer. He's kind of known around as kind of a bit, I guess, crazy. The locals, he's from there, his family's live there. His family actually owns a large part of the town, but he's kind of just known as this like recluse who doesn't talk or say anything. Well, she runs into him, and her dad was actually deaf, so she can sign, and they basically just form this really beautiful friendship first because she's kind of determined that she's going to be friends with him. And it kind of just develops from there into this amazing love story, and it really isn't that complicated to me of a story, but the way that Mia Sheridan created just the characters and the way they fell in love, and they definitely did have hardships, and they both had to go through a lot. You know, Bree had a lot going on back home that she had to kind of come to terms with. Archer, because he'd been kind of reclusive for so long, he had a lot to overcome as far as like social kind of interactions with other people, how to interact when he couldn't speak, that kind of thing, and a lot with his family. So if you're looking for a beautifully written love story that was emotional but also just so touching, and so many of the lines in this book are just ones that stick with you, and I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars in my reread. I highly recommend it. Okay guys, those are all the books I read in the second half of February. Let me know what you guys read, or if you've read any of these, let me know what your thoughts were, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!